Mhm.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Does that sound
Sure.
good?
Yeah.
So I will start. Welcome to our Behavior at Home webinar series. We're so glad you could all join us. This is presented by the Family Focus Resource Center and Advanced Behavioral Pathways. Family Focus Resource Center provides parent-to-parent support, information, and education for families that live in North Valley County, and Advanced Behavioral Pathways is an agency that provides behavioral services to children and adults. We are collaborating on this 5-part series of webinars, and they are offered in English and Spanish. My name is Kathleen Secchi. I work for the Family Focus Resource Center in our Santa Clarita office. I'm the coordinator. I'll be hosting this webinar and helping with the Q&A. I'm also a parent of 3 young adult children. My older son is a consumer with the Regional Center. Before we start, I'd like to provide some information about how this will work. All attendees are currently muted so that there's no background noise. You will be able to see the presentation on your screen. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end. If you have a question, you can either type it in the chat box or raise your hand and we will unmute your audio. To raise your hand, click on the icon labeled Participants at the bottom center of your screen. At the bottom of the window on the right side of the screen, click the button labeled Raise Hand. Your digital hand is now raised. Don't worry about taking notes. We will provide a handout and some downloadable resources after the presentation on our website. The link is provided in the chat box. This is week 2 of our 5-week series, and we will be talking about today simple behavior strategies, as you can see. This webinar will share simple behavior strategies that can be used at home to prevent challenging behavior and help maintain calm at home. Strategies include those that are used in school settings and that can be used at home during school closures. Presenters will review how to use the strategies and the benefits of each. So I think without further ado, I'll hand this back over to Michelle Heid, our presenter.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Victoria and Kathy and the Family Focus Resource Center for having us. It was great to present last week, and if you weren't able to attend or you missed that one, it is available on the website. So the website is great, providing a lot of great resources at this time. As Kathleen mentioned, we provide behavioral services across the San Fernando, Santa Clarita, and Antelope Valleys. We're primarily located in Santa Clarita Valley, although we do provide a lot of services as well in the Antelope Valley in the school districts there. We provide the bulk of our services, and I say we, I am a team. We have 4 board certified behavior analysts who work on our team providing consultation services, but mostly in schools. So this has been a really difficult time for us as clinicians to know that our parents are all at home trying to do what a team does and meet the needs of their child, and we're only able to provide remote consultation. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on the webinar and provide, some of this information more widely to hopefully benefit those parents at home who are really struggling with trying to, fit in the school, their own work, and manage difficult behavior. These are a lot of strategies that we do use in classrooms, but they're very adaptable to using them at home as well to support your children. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through, and we're going to get started. So this webinar is going to cover some proactive strategies, and those include we're going to review those in a moment, and then some simple strategies like reminders, choices, timers, visual supports, and how to use rewards. And then I've thrown in some advanced strategies for those of you that want a little bit more information. It's going to be a lot of information in about 40-45 minutes with some time for questions at the end. So let's get started. So what are proactive strategies? Well, proactive strategies are strategies that we use before the challenging behavior occurs. So these are things that, we can wake up in the morning and start doing right from the beginning of our day, all throughout the day to really prevent challenging behavior. Why do we not do this as often? Well, because it takes time and energy before the challenging behavior occurs. So we often don't really think about it. And I usually talk about it's like your water heater. You don't service it proactively. You wait until it breaks and then there's water all over the floor and then you attend to it. But we'd all be better off if we walked out to our water heater once a month and checked on it. Well, our kids need proactive strategies more than once a month. They're very helpful every single day. And some of the things we talked about last week, the visual supports and activity schedules, those are proactive strategies, putting something in place that's going to help before a challenging behavior. So if you didn't see that webinar, you can go back and watch it. I guarantee that if you do some of these proactive strategies, it is going to save time in the long run. And most of us parents would really rather put our time in at the front end and prevent a challenging behavior than have to deal with a challenging behavior later because we didn't do something we could have done to help or prevent it. So, something you can think about is when you wake up every morning, okay, what strategies can I use that are going to help today, even before a challenge occurs? So some of these are just encouraging good behavior. And one way that we encourage good behavior is make sure that their basic needs are met. And, parents, we're really good at doing this. But when we get kids in schools, sometimes we have to kind of do these checks to ensure their basic needs are met. We have to make sure that they're not hungry, that they've had plenty of food, that they've had breakfast. Some students that I support, they come on a bus and they've been on a bus for a while and they may be hungry by the time that they get to school, even if they had a hearty breakfast at home. And I've had parents assure me that their child had a hearty breakfast, but by the time they get to school, they're hungry again because their metabolism is such that they need frequent food. So, just kind of going through this checklist of making sure they've had adequate food, they have adequate levels of attention, which vary from person to person. So some, children need a lot more attention than others. And I really feel like attention is something that we should provide and provide it proactively to the level that our child needs it and kind of fill up that cup of attention all throughout the day. Activities, as we talked about in last webinar, are also really something that can ensure that those basic needs are met. Making sure that they have adequate activities to do throughout the day can really prevent challenging behavior from occurring because it keeps kids busy. And a lot of times I'll go into classrooms and teachers will report, well, I'm not putting any demands on them. I'm not having them do anything yet. They're engaging in all this challenging behavior. Well, it might be because they're bored. They don't have anything to do and they need, a lot of really active activities. And some of the best classrooms that I've seen are ones in which the students are really engaged in a variety of activities throughout the day with manipulatives, moving about, and all different kinds of activities throughout the day. So think of how you can incorporate those activities. And the last webinar, again, was a lot about that, so you can go back and watch that. Another thing we often want to check on is medications. If a child takes medications, that consistency of taking it at the same time every day can really help. And I know in my life with my son, and he hates it now that he's 19 when I ask him this, but when he's having a really difficult day, that's the first thing I check with is, did you take your medication? And when was the last time you ate? And not anymore, he's much better about it now, but when he was much younger, it was often his really challenging days would mean he didn't take his medication. And now he's 19, he doesn't eat often enough. And that also can have an impact on his behavior. So check in on these things and just ensure those needs are met. Other things that we can do to encourage positive behavior is changes to the environment. And we're going to talk about that more at the end, but just simple environmental changes might help children engage in more positive behavior. One story that I share when I teach about this is that I went into a home, because we do home services as well at times, although primarily we're in schools. I went into a home to provide some home services. And one of the parents' complaints or challenges was that the children didn't pick up after themselves. And one of the things was they didn't put their shoes where they didn't put their shoes away. But when I came in the home, I didn't see anywhere where shoes could go. Everything was very chaotic and messy. And if I, as an adult, I wouldn't even have known where to put my shoes away. So the children didn't either. But with some simple environmental modifications and a basket in the closet labeled shoes, then the shoes went in the shoe basket and the problem was solved after a lot of work and changes to the environment. So think about, creating places where things go and changes to the environment to make it more kid-friendly that might help. Also, you want to do things like trigger the behavior that you want to see. And, some of the strategies we're going to talk about may help to trigger that behavior that you want to see. Something like providing reinforcement often may trigger behavior that you want to see, because if you provide that praise for behavior and that's reinforcing for your child, then that behavior is likely to continue. We're going to talk more about some of that a bit later, but another strategy is just simply the way that we provide verbal directions or directions at all. My son, if I tell him something, he's not likely to respond right away, or maybe even ever, or I might get a, later. But if I put a sticky note with that direction, or even a list of things that need to be done near him, he's much more likely to respond. So what is that with your child? How can you give directions in a way that is going to get them to follow instead of give you some type of challenging behavior in response or just ignore? Other things we talked about in the last webinar too, that predictability and routine and consistency. So, really being consistent in your expectations and consistent in your responses can really help to encourage good behavior. And then we provide clear, easy to understand directions. So, we might give a lecture, but then it needs to be followed with, one sentence of clear, easy to understand directions. And for a lot of children, I would skip the lecture altogether because they stopped listening after, a couple minutes. So, just give them that clear, easy direction, that expectation so that they can follow it more easily. Reminders. These are really, really important. So something in schools that, happens often is the teacher reviews the schedule. They go over what's going to happen throughout the day. And it helps kids to follow along with that schedule and engage in all of those expected behaviors. So providing those reminders, either verbally or written reminders, depending on what your child responds to best, can really help them. Things like when there's going to be a schedule change, just simply telling them, giving them a warning of what's coming up. In school they do, in 2 minutes, it's going to be recess, or in 2 minutes, we're going to clean up. All of those reminders throughout the day, and that's something that we can do at home to really help. Another thing is telling them when the rewards will be earned. So if they ask for something and they can't have it right then, when is it going to be available? I worked with a young man who really liked Dr. Pepper, and he really would engage in a lot of challenging behavior to get Dr. Pepper. And we in part solved that by putting up a calendar, and we would indicate on the calendar when Dr. Pepper would be available, because mom wanted to limit it to only certain days of the week. And so we would show him the calendar, and then he got to the point where he would walk to the calendar and look himself to see, okay, where we are today, when is Dr. Pepper going to be available? So, telling them when they're going to earn those rewards might help them to engage in expected behavior and kind of know when that reward is coming. So this just really helps them to prepare for what's coming next. It helps them to prepare for what's happening throughout the day. And it can really keep them motivated through difficult tasks. So especially if you have a difficult task and it's going to be followed by something more fun, to remind them, remember, after we're done with this, we're going to read a story. After we're done with this, we're going to go play outside. It can help kind of stay engaged and keep going. And that works for adults too. Most of these strategies actually work for adults too, but we've just adapted them for children. So some of us might be using them in our own work life right now. Choices. This is something that I cannot stress enough how important this is, especially for those children that we might call something like strong-willed or stubborn. choices can be really, really powerful. So we say provide choices whenever that's possible. So things like types of materials to use. It can be as simple as, do you want to use this pencil or this pencil? The pencils can be the same, and still giving that choice might help. Or it's even better if you say, do you want to use, the blue marker or the red marker? Do you want to use this piece of paper or that piece of paper? Giving them those choices can really make them feel like they have that sense of control, and can then, they may just, make a choice instead of engage in challenging behavior. Something that often is, troublesome when we're giving choices is if we say, do you want this one or this one? And they say, no, I want that other one that you didn't offer. So you say, do you want A or B? And they say C. What do you do? Well, it really depends on the child and the situation. So I say, if that choice that they're asking for is reasonable and acceptable, then you might go ahead and give it. But if it's a child where, they're going to constantly be coming up with something else that you're not offering, then you may want to teach them, nope, it's this one or this one. And so you may just continually offer this or this until they make a choice, or make that choice for them at some point if they don't choose. So if you're offering, the red pen or the blue pen, and they don't make a choice, you might say, okay, let's use the red pen, and just move forward. So, see how some of that works with your child, and every child is a little bit different in how they respond to this, but this can work really well for a lot of kids. So things like, do you want to do math first or language arts first? Do you want to eat your vegetables first or your chicken first? When it really doesn't matter, then give them a choice. Where to do an activity is super powerful, especially I think right now we're all kind of tired of, sitting in the same spot, staying at home, doing the same thing. So moving their school activities, for part of the day to the living room, or in the backyard, or to the garage if you have a nice area in, other areas of the home where they can spend that time and get that work done. Maybe part of their day they work at a table, and part of their day they work on the carpet or on the floor or on a beanbag. Just really varying it up might really help. And again, just gives them that sense of control when you say, do you want to work here? Do you want to work there? And they get to pick. I don't care where you work, just make a choice and get it done. And sometimes that's just a great way to help kids kind of through things. Sometimes I'm amazed at how well that really works, is just giving them choices, and how rare we actually think about doing that. In classrooms, I don't see that very often. I see, no, they're supposed to do this, and there's no choices involved, and we kind of can build choices into really any activity. So think about how to do that. Another great activity or strategy is to use timers. Right now in this remote consultation time, I've sent more timers in the mail to homes than I ever thought I would. Some parents need a 2-minute timer for things like brushing teeth, or, doing certain tasks. Some need a 10-minute timer. And sand timers are really great because they can actually see the time elapsing. And it's, tactile, where they turn it over and they start an activity. And then when the time's out, either they should be done or they should continue for that period of time. So it can be really great to see how long they have for a task, or how long they have to wait for something. So this might be really powerful for some parents who are working, and you're trying to get your work done, but you need to attend to your kids too, and having a sand timer by your desk, that they can just turn over. So you can say, I'm not available now, but I'll be available in 10 minutes. Turn the timer over. Then you have 10 minutes to finish it up, what your work, and then attend to them, and it helps them learn to wait. It also can set boundaries, because they can see how much time they have with something, so they can have that that kind of boundary with whatever activity they're doing. So timers can really help. And here's some just examples. These are just, easy examples. And in the handout, there's some resources as far as websites. Amazon is where I get most of them, but there's also a website called Learning Resources and another one called Lakeshore Learning. But what I'm going to do after the webinar is get a document together with the links of these that we're showing you so that you can access that on the Family Focus website and then get them online if you want to. So these are just some pictures of some simple sand timers. There's really small ones and then there's larger ones. For some kids that might be better, or if you use it really often, you might want to invest in one that's a little bit larger. There's also kitchen timers, so these digital timers. The only caveat is some of these are loud, so that may or may not work for your house. So you may need to find one that really meets your needs and is not as so loud. When we use these in classrooms, if we're using a digital timer that is audible, we'll often muffle them by placing some type of gauze or something and tape on the back so they're not so loud and are just heard in the area of like the student desk. So tricks that you can do to make it work for your house. There's the one with the cone shape where I think it turns color over time and it's programmable so you can set it how you want it to work. And then the one that looks like a stoplight works about the same way. Another one I really like is the cube because you put the time that you want, you set the cube the way you want, and then it just counts down and gives you that time. So those are all some pretty kid-friendly timers. And then here are just, some other ones. This time timer here in the middle is often used in classrooms. It's a great way to visually represent time as it elapses, over time. I know when my son was young, we used these and we used them constantly, so much so that I had to buy multiple of them because they would break eventually. They're more sturdy now. Don't worry, that was like 15 years ago. So now they're more durable, but it's a great visual representation. They also have an app, a time timer app on the phone that looks very similar, and it's relatively inexpensive. I think it's about $5. But you all have timers on your phones already in the iPhone or smartphone app. There's usually a timer there. And often when I'm doing in-home services, I'll teach kids how to use those and set them themselves and start using them as some of those self-management strategies where they're actually able to set a timer, do an activity for a certain amount of time, and then when the timer goes off, transition on their own without parents having to attend. So that can be a great skill to teach your child so they can be a little bit more independent in the home. Visual supports are something that we talked about at length during the last webinar. So these, sometimes I feel like I rely on them too heavily. I feel like they can solve so many problems. And they can be things like schedules or routines with pictures on them, or even just as simple as notes with a note on the door that says mom's working, a note on the door that says don't let the dog out, a note on the door that says remember to get the mail. All of those little notes or sticky notes that you can put around the house to kind of help. And then you can get really fancy and create individual charts or token charts or chore charts. And we went over those a lot during the last webinar. So go there if you want more information. The picture you see here is just a simple first then. So these are typically Velcro icons that we create and stick on, and then have the child either take them off or just show them like what they're doing now and what's coming up. And again, can be really successful to help a child transition through their day without engaging in a lot of challenging behavior. I actually had one student who didn't like to transition out of the classroom and didn't go to the library, wouldn't go to the MPR. We simply took pictures of all of those places, used this first then, and he would see the picture of the MPR, and somehow that really helped him go into that environment and not be so afraid. So he would actually transition. And then the teacher called me one day and she was, oh no, the school has created a garden. He's not going to go to the garden without a picture of the garden. Well, luckily, this garden was a big deal, and the local newspaper wrote a story about it, and there was a picture of the garden in the story. I quickly used that picture to create an icon, and the first day the class was going to the garden, this student went, and it was a great success simply by using that picture. So these can be really great to set up, and from last webinar, there's some samples on the website. So rewards. Rewards can really, really help. We all are rewarded for engaging in positive behavior through paychecks at work and praise at home or having a tidy household. So rewards can really help. And they can help kids follow directions or do difficult tasks, especially if we remind them of the reward that's going to be offered. Letting them know what they're going to earn might help keep them motivated through a task. And we may want to kind of reserve some of those really special rewards that they can only get for following directions or completing a task. So I know when my son was young, things like going out for ice cream were a huge treat. And I would really save that for something that he earned to take him out for ice cream. But he didn't just get ice cream, out at the ice cream store any old time. Now that's even more difficult to go get ice cream, but I think we can. So just wear your mask and go get some ice cream. So you might want to kind of reserve and save those really special things and only give them when they earn them so that you have them then to use for earning. And rewarding that good behavior, it will increase the behavior. So if if your child is engaging in a behavior that you want to see continue, they're playing nicely with their siblings, they transition off their electronics, they get their math done, whatever that is, you want to make sure that you provide some type of reward for engaging in that behavior so that we can encourage that behavior to continue. You really want to make sure to use things that are actually rewarding. And this is different for all kids and kids of all ages. And the example I always use is that if you give me lemon cake for engaging in a great webinar today, I'm not going to want to do a webinar in the future because I don't like lemon cake. So don't give me lemon cake for completing a good job. Give me something that I do like. So I like chocolate cake, not lemon cake. All kids are different. Find what works for them. And for teenagers, it can be even more difficult because praise from parents can actually be punishing. They don't like it. They don't want you to notice that they're doing a good job. And they don't want you to talk about it. So sometimes praising behavior can actually have the opposite effect than what we want it to. So you really have to try to look for those rewards that can help teenagers. And then we always, when we teach this, we always get comments about is rewarding bribing? And it's definitely not. Rewards are something that are given after a behavior is done to encourage that behavior to continue. It's usually given for behavior that is positive, that is good behavior, that is ethical. Bribes are typically offered before a behavior occurs to engage in something unethical or illegal. And so rewarding your children for behavior that you want to see continue is not the same as bribery at all. And in fact, if they removed rewards from society, we would all not go to work in the morning. Some of us really get that intrinsic motivation from our jobs and we just love doing what we do. But the main reason we all have jobs typically is so that we get that paycheck. And if your boss stopped paying you, you would probably stop going to work or not do as good a job. That doesn't have to be monetary for your kids. It doesn't have to be food, although sometimes that that can be really helpful, especially for kids who are experiencing a lot of challenges, a lot of disability related challenges. It may be very difficult to find things other than food that are going to motivate or act as a reward. So we do typically start there if we can't find anything else, but we quickly want to pair it with other things so that we can move away from food as a reward or a reinforcer. So here's just some special activities. So, reading their favorite book, or doing, a certain activity that you really just save as a reward. I say extra time on electronics because, we don't necessarily want to have kids earn every minute on their electronics, but if they do a good job, maybe they get, 5 or 10 minutes above what they normally get. So for some kids, I recommend in homes that they get a set amount of electronics every day, just because, and then you add in extra on top of that. For some kids, that might be money or an allowance. You might be able to create a token system and have that work. I just encourage you to not make things too complex, or you may not stick with it and it may be too complex for the kids. So just keep it simple. And then you might want to use, special toys or candy. Toys are great because you can just, give something that you would ordinarily given them anyway, but just give it to them piece by piece. So maybe they get, a few new blocks every time they do something really well, to then build that set of, 30 blocks or something like that. So you can kind of use them in little pieces. If your child likes Matchbox cars, then buy a pack. Don't give them the whole pack at once. Give them one at a time to reward good behavior. So you can kind of, keep things that you would have given them anyway, but then kind of dole them out as rewards for good behavior. First then statements is something we talked about during the last webinar as well, but again, can be really helpful. So it just helps them know, what's coming next. This is known as grandma's rule. So it's that whole eat your vegetables and then you can have ice cream. Then we use this in school a lot too, to say, first you're going to read a book and then we're going to have some bubbles. First we're going to do math and then it's recess time. And this is something simple too that you can use at home. First clean your room and then we'll play outside. And you may want to use a picture icon like the one you see on the screen, or you may just be able to simply tell them. These work best if it's a more difficult task followed by something fun, although they can work just as a schedule too. They also work as reminders of what's kind of coming up. And a lot of these strategies can be combined with other things that we've already discussed. Frequent breaks are something that is also really important. So in school, they do maybe a 20-minute academic activity, then they're, moving to another area of the classroom and they're getting up and they're doing a brain break and they're having Go Noodle. So frequent breaks can really be helpful. And it can break up tasks, and you want to try to do some of those movement breaks. And sometimes doing any activity too long can cause difficulty maintaining focus or transitioning from that activity. So I'm sure a lot of parents have experienced where their child has played video games or been on the electronics for a long period of time, and it's even harder to get them off after they've been on for a really long time than it would have been transitioning a little bit earlier into it. I know my son is like that. If he's been playing video games for over an hour, it's going to be really hard to get him off of it. But if he's only been doing it for about 20 minutes, then I can usually get him to transition a lot easier. How frequent the breaks are, that really depends on your child, and it's different for every child and every family. So just figure out what works. Here are some advanced strategies. We're going to talk about teaching missing skills and some communication and something really cool that I think is super fun. So teaching missing skills, difficult behavior may occur because they don't have the skill. So if they don't have the skill to ask for help, they may scream and shout to get attention and get help. But if you teach them how to ask for help, then they may be able to do that. So when you're experiencing a challenging behavior, you might want to really think, what is the missing skill here and how can I teach it? And then you need to make a plan to teach it. It takes a long time sometimes to learn those new skills. So make sure that you have a plan and that you practice often. Practicing, every few days is probably not enough. You might want to build that into practice every day, and make sure that you have repeated practice of that skill. And then just keep in mind that a lot of the children that I support, they're missing skills that others learn easily. So it may not be readily apparent that, oh, my child doesn't know how to ask for help or doesn't know how to transition from one activity to the other, because other kids learn that kind of easily without that direct teaching, where our kids sometimes need that direct teaching on things that we don't really expect them to need, or we didn't have to use with our other typical kids. So just keep that in mind and build in that practice into your day so that they can learn those skills. A lot of difficulties, as we know, come from lack of communication. So a lot of our, a lot of the clients that we support, a lot of the students that we support, they have difficulty with communication. Either they have very limited vocal communication, some have no vocal communication, and some are just emerging language learners. And we really need to make sure that we're giving them the words that they need. We're modeling that language for them. We're doing those practice kind of throughout the day. And we may need to do some picture icons. One thing that I learned very early in my parenting was my son was having a difficult time communicating and kind of learning language. And they said, do a picture schedule or picture icons. And I said, no, as soon as we do that, he's really never going to talk. And that's exactly the opposite of what the research states. The research states that if you use picture icons, that it will actually encourage language. So if you're going to use picture icons, you just want to make sure you pair them with vocal language, but they can be really helpful in actually learning vocal communication. And when I say vocal communication, I mean communicating with our words. When I say verbal communication, that's really anything. That's gestures, that's picture icons, that's behavior that I'm engaging in to communicate my wants and needs to you. So we all engage in some level of verbal behavior, but some people are vocal and some are not. So think about how you can help your child communicate their needs. Okay, this is the one that's super exciting, and I hope you think it's as exciting as I do. So behavioral momentum is something that it is really based on behavioral science. I'm not just making it up, but it's really just kind of in a nutshell that tasks get easier once you start them. So if you look at this pile of dishes, you think, oh my gosh, I don't want to do all those dishes. It's a huge mess. And you get overwhelmed and you don't want to start. But as you start, often it just kind of becomes easier. Then you clean the sink and you clean all the dishes, and then you clean the countertops, and then you do other things. And it just kind of starts where one task will lead to another task. So how do we use this in our homes? Well, we can start with doing easier tasks first, get that momentum moving, and then move on to a more difficult task. If something's difficult, we can provide help in the beginning, get our kids started before we fade our help or walk away. You can also just make things more fun. So I hate dishes, but watching my iPad or TV while I'm doing dishes then makes it not so bad. Or listening to music, or maybe taking a task and doing it outside. Dishes you can't really do outside, but other things you could. So just how can we make things more fun? And this really does work. I've used it in my practice over and over in homes, in schools, in different ways to really get kids to engage and comply with directions throughout the day and engage in academics, and it can really help. I worked in one classroom where we had a lot of tasks that were labeled kind of easy, and then some that were medium and some that were hard. And we would ramp up from easy to medium, then to hard, and then back down, medium, and then easy. And the kids could really do that all day, whereas before things were a lot more challenging for them. So just think about how you can use that. Non-contingent reinforcement is also something that I really like and had a hard time really understanding when I was first learning about it and wondering how it would work or why it would work. But this is just basically where we're providing reinforcement throughout the day. And it's non-contingent because it's not dependent on earning that reinforcement or earning that praise. It's just because. So we can provide attention throughout the day. We can do praise and positive statements throughout the day, fun activities throughout the day. And these are things, again, that we do just because, not because you've earned them, not because they're contingent on some behavior, but just because we're adding in some fun activities throughout the day, we're adding some praise and positive statements. It can really encourage good behavior through the day. So something really kind of cool that we can use. And then also environmental enrichment. So can we structure the environment to improve behavior? Can we create dedicated spaces to do activities? Create dedicated spaces where things belong so that it's easier to, get out an activity, do an activity, and put it back. And then we can also make the environment fun and kid friendly. So, here's a great picture, and I'm sure all of our houses don't look that wonderful because this is probably from a magazine or something, but think about your own house and how you can create spaces dedicated for certain activities. And we're all home right now. This might be a great time to do some organization to help your child clean up on their own, or help your child even do chores around the house and things in an easier way. So in my house, everything has a place. My keys go on the key hook, and everything has a place. But if I go to look for my keys and they're not on the key ring, I really don't even know where to start looking for them because they belong on the key ring. So everything has a place, and if everything just stays in its place, then it's easy to find. And I know not everyone's like that, but we can all try and think of little ways that we can make our home environment a little bit easier for our kids to navigate. And this also has to do with non-contingent reinforcement, which we went over before, because if we create spaces that are enriching and fun to be in, it is going to encourage more appropriate behavior. So I'll end on one story. I was working with a young person in their home. I think she was 11 or 12, maybe when I started working with her. And she had a lot of challenges, motor challenges, vocal challenges, and there wasn't a whole lot of activities that she could do. And with the mom's help, we really brainstormed and found activities that she could do. And we taught her to do things. In fact, we taught her to do things that mom said, I never thought she would really learn to do that. But just with some modifications and with some help and practice. And then we put in the environment all these activities that she could go and get and do on her own and put away. And simple things like putting music on. She learned how to do that and could put music on that she liked. And a lot of her challenging behaviors really decreased simply because of environmental enrichment and this non-contingent reinforcement, where she had access to things that she liked throughout the day and didn't have to engage in challenging behavior to get them. So that brings us all the way to the end of our presentation. I hope that you enjoyed those strategies, and we have some time for questions. And then I hope you'll all join us next Wednesday for behavior basics. So thank you. I have time for questions. I think if you'd like to ask questions, you can add them in the chat. You can raise your hand.
Yeah, this is Victoria, and I'm helping with the webinar today. If you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself. You can raise a hand and I can unmute you, or you can type something in. I'm looking.
So while we're seeing if anybody has questions, Victoria did mention in the chat too, in your home, place to do puzzles or place for reading or a place to do Legos, and then also a place to put those things away when they're done with them, might be, really great. And even, using other areas of your home. So, you might have a lot of child activities in their room, but maybe it's time to do reading in the living room or do reading on the porch. So just kind of moving things around and creating spaces for those things might be really helpful.
Right. Also, maybe do some activities together with your child. I'm going to read some things for work, and you can sit down next to me and you can read your book. And that makes it more of a shared activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked about last week, even having, finding activities that the certain kids can do together if you have multiple kids. So, maybe the older one does their academics in the morning while you're working with the younger one, and then you trade and have activities that the older child can do with the younger child together more independently, or identifying what activities the child can do independently and reserving them or making a list of them for when you need to get your work done if you're balancing both of that work and home at the same time. So we still have more time for questions, but I don't see any coming.
Yeah, someone just asked about getting an email from last week's presentation, because this is a series of 5. We didn't send out any emails. The files are really too big, some of them, to include in emails. So instead, I gave you a link to our website, and you can, if you didn't watch last week's webinar, you can watch it, or you could download the materials and read it on your own, or just you can do that. You can share it with other people. Oh, and we will also put this week's webinar there too. You can watch it later. Someone did ask a question. Irma asks, what can I do if the child is always having a tantrum?
So Irma, that's a tough question to answer. I would, want to ask more questions about what's happening before the tantrum occurs. Why do we think it is? One thing I mentioned last week, and I'll mention it again, is that all the school teams really should be available for consultation. So I would encourage you to reach out to your child's school team to ask them specific questions about your child, and see if they can provide some more specific consultation. I'd be happy to do that offline and try to answer those questions more specifically. But again, if your child is having tantrums, then what can you do before the tantrum occurs to prevent the tantrum from occurring? And I would really look to, trying to be creative and identify those solutions that you can do before the tantrum occurs to prevent it. Because once a tantrum is occurring, you really just have to manage through it and not necessarily give them what they want. Because if you give them what they want, it stops the tantrum in the moment, but then you're going to encourage more tantrums in the future when they want access to those things. If they're tantruming to get something they want. So someone else says, what if the child becomes aggressive after you provide choices? And that also can be, really challenging. I would say if you're, using an if then, or if you're giving choices and they're not making a choice and responding to that, then you may want to not give choices and just give limited activities until they learn to make a choice. And making a choice is another skill that we sometimes have to actually teach, that other kids may just kind of pick up. So I will often have children and adults that I work with that we're working on how to make a choice, and we're giving really easy choices throughout the day. We're giving lots of choices throughout the day and teaching how to make a choice so that they can do that without engaging in challenging behavior. And Irma followed up with refusing to wash hands, which right now is a big problem. So again, I would try to come up with some creative solutions. You may want to use hand sanitizer or wipes instead of washing hands. They might prefer that more, or they might, like that a little bit better. You might also practice washing hands more frequently so we get used to doing it, even though that's going to be really challenging in the beginning. But just doing it more frequently can help us build that skill and kind of get used to doing it. Other ideas might be, even just making it more fun, like a bowl of water with soap on the porch or outside the house, that they just can dunk their hands in and kind of practice that way. The weather is getting a little bit warmer, and for kids who are kind of aversive to that water or washing hands, we might do a lot of water play. And then you can always incorporate soap and bubbles into your water play, and then they are actually practicing washing their hands without really knowing it. So hopefully that's helpful, and you can work with that to get some ideas of how to help. But again, for specific challenges, your school teams should be available to help and give you that guidance and consultation. I know my team of BCBAs is reaching out weekly to all of the students that we support and really trying to offer a lot of, individualized consultation. So I would encourage you to reach out to your teacher, reach out to other people on the IEP team that might be able to be helpful to really help make a specific plan for those things. If that's not helpful, then you can, of course, reach out to me. I would be happy to try to help. And I say try because it's always better to get help from people who know your child best. So if I don't know your child, it might be a little bit more difficult, but I'm happy to try to help. Right now is a time where I think we're all just trying to do what we can to help one another to get through, this difficult time. And I feel for all of you parents that are at home and having to teach your children to wash their hands more frequently. And that's really challenging. Wear masks. That's another one that is really challenging for kids in our community. And it's going to be a necessity if we're going to, go back out into the community. So we actually wrote a short article on how to help your kids wear masks that I would be happy to share, Vicki, if you want to put that up as well.
Okay, sure.
So I can, maybe we can even do one on washing hands, because that sounds like it would be helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah, Michelle, maybe this is Kathleen from Family Focus. You bring up really great ideas about, washing hands, working on wearing a mask, working on social distancing, before we go back to school and whatever that looks like. We've had parents bring that up often, their concerns about, even how to start and attempt to work on that. So it's a good point.
Well, we've got some tips on that mask wearing, so I'll be sure to share that with you guys. Yeah, thanks, Marilyn. I'll make sure to get that onto the off to Family Focus so they can put it on the website. There's also some really great videos on wearing a mask that I can also share that my team has found. We didn't create them, but we found some good ones. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody.
I'm sorry, I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay. While you're doing that, I just wanted to say, again, remind everybody that our webinars page on our website is sort of the home for all of the information related to this webinar series. You can get the handouts. You can get links to watch the webinars, probably starting tomorrow, today's webinar. And we also have some samples of some of these materials that Michelle has provided to us.
Okay. Well, it looks like we are coming to a close. So again, this is Kathleen. We hope that you'll join us next week for the third installment, Behavior Basics, as Michelle mentioned earlier. And that will cover, the challenges parents are facing, understanding and managing difficult behavior at home. The webinar will help you understand what behavior communicates and effective strategies to help you meet those needs. We will cover functions of behavior, how to respond to challenging behavior, teaching those missing skills, and seeing behavior as communication to inform parenting strategies. So we hope that you will join us, and thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thanks,
Have a good week.
And
Thank
thanks,
you.
Family
Same to
Focus,
you.
for providing it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.